Okay.
All right, so I'm Christian Montoya.
I'm Sean.
I'm James.
And our project is the WeLock. All right, so just to give you a reminder of what our project is, it is a way of replacing former methods of locks, such as a combination lock or a key lock, by using Bluetooth BLE to pair with your iPhone or Android. That way we have a much more modern and convenient way of unlocking something. And this is much more convenient because we'll be able to give the keys to other people that want to unlock the lock. And if someone else has this app, is not going to be able to unlock it unless they have that key, because it will just it'll just give out a signal that it doesn't identify your phone.
So the main way we're using, the main mechanism we're using to unlock the lock is by using the Nitinol shape memory alloy, which is an alloy of nickel and titanium. And the way Nitinol works is it has two different crystalline structures, one at a low temperature and one at a high temperature. So at low temperatures, it's in its martensite crystalline structure, which is really weak and easy to deform. However, when you heat it up beyond a certain activation point, the crystalline structure shifts to the austenite structure, which is much stronger than the martensite and is also able to remember a previously programmed shape. And then to program it, you would heat it up far beyond this temperature to the point where you would actually begin annealing the metal, and that programs it into a certain shape. So when we heat up the Nitinol, it will both change shape and also contract because of that changing crystal structure. And we are taking advantage of the contraction to open our lock.
So the design of our enclosure is as follows. We went with a simple flagpole sear. We went with this design because it was simple to manufacture and it was also effective. Where we would mount the Nitinol is in the lower right side of the PCB, and it would be looped around the sear. By looping it, we effectively double the pull travel distance of the Nitinol. This ensured that we got enough travel distance between the sear and the latch so that the lock can come undone.
So the power calculations for the board take into account the fact that the maximum power usage is during an unlock cycle, because we would be passing current through the Nitinol in order to activate it, as well as having the P-sock awake and able to perform the action. So during the awake cycle, where it's unlocking and also receiving data from Bluetooth, the P-sock and the Nitinol combined together uses 3.6 times 10 to the negative 4 watt-hours of energy. And if we assume that you unlock the lock about 5 times a day, then the total energy usage per day would be 0.002 watt-hours. Then after you're done unlocking, the P-sock will go to sleep, and for the majority of the day it will remain asleep. And during this time, the P-sock will consume 7.2 times 10 to the negative 4 watt-hours per day. And so combining all of this together and dividing by the capacity of our battery, we find that it will last for about 562 days, which should be a year and a half. So this is our PCB design, which is actually the first revision because we didn't go through any other revisions, as this PCB performed its job pretty well, with a few bumps along the way, but in the end it worked. So the primary component of the P-sock is the P-sock 4 BLE, which is handling everything. It's communicating with the app and activating the Nitinol. There's a MOSFET transistor on the board, which is actually the component that's actually handling the current to the Nitinol, as drawing half an amp through the P-sock would not be very good for the P-sock. And there's a supercapacitor that is there to help the battery supply the fairly large amount of current we need to pass through the Nitinol. And we have our programming pins off board on a cutaway portion because this whole board would not fit inside of our enclosure.
Can you expand a little bit on the supercap? Why did you need to use that as opposed to just going directly from the battery?
All right, so the battery is a 400 milliamp hour battery. And we found through lab testing that the Nitinol requires about 500 milliamps of current in order to activate. So the battery is able to supply about 400 milliamps of current before it starts to detect overcurrent and begins to turn off the supply. So we have a capacitor there to help it supply charge to the nitinol when activating the nitinol.
It can release a lot of current.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there for use as like a burst of current when you're activating the nitinol.
And you're charging this directly from the regulator or directly from the battery?
I'm sorry. The super cap is at the same voltage as the battery. Is in parallel with the battery to ground. So it's directly at the battery voltage.
And when it's discharging, does it disconnect the battery or just keep it on the battery?
It's still on the battery, so the capacitor and the battery are in parallel connected to the nitinol.
Okay, so the total cost of one lock is around $53. Can you go to the next slide? The most costly piece of our device was the enclosure at over $20. The next was the PSOC. The power, including the battery, was roughly $7, and all of the other components were roughly $11.
Alright, for our state diagram, it was pretty simple. There's basically just an unlock state and a lock state. And for our communications chart, as the phone connects with the PSOC using BLE, and then there's a battery test point that sends the voltage to PSOC, and the PSOC sends the PWM to the nitinol. And then this is our app, and then it starts off on that side, and it searches for the device, and once it found it, it says connect, and once you connect it, it gives you the option to unlock. Unless it doesn't identify your phone, then it will just send out a light that it doesn't recognize it. And then
that should be the video.
So again, on the super cap, when it's discharging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a spike on the microcontroller voltage supply that maybe caused a glitch on the microcontroller, or did the microcontroller stay alive on the top?
The microcontroller was on the entire time.
And when it discharged, it did not cause a spike that.
Well, our capacitor is a pretty large capacitor. It's 47 millifarads of capacitance. So by the time the nitinol is done activating, not much of that has really discharged. The voltage on the capacitor is fairly constant, and so there aren't large fluctuations enough to cause the PSOC.
And the PSOC goes through the regulator, anyway, right?
Yeah.
It's from the battery to the regulator. Okay.
Combinations and keys are a thing of the past. We live in a mobile society where the smartphone has become an integral part of our lives, yet we still rely on these archaic methods for securing our belongings. We say, no more. We have a new way of keeping our valuables safe, and we bring to you today, WeLock. The WeLock is a Bluetooth-controlled padlock that does not rely on any combination or key. Traditional padlocks either use a physical key or a sequence of numbers. Keys can be lost and are cumbersome to carry around, while combinations are easily forgotten and easily discovered. WeLock eliminates all these weaknesses by combining the authentication and the unlock mechanism into one simple button press. There are no keys to lose or combinations to remember. The application and the lock work together to verify the identity of the request entirely without human intervention. There is no chance for another person to gain access to the lock by knowing a combination or duplicating a key. The whole process is contained within the software.
The WeLock uses Bluetooth Low Energy as the method of communication. The user uses a smartphone application to send a Bluetooth signal to the WeLock. The lock receives information about the phone requesting the unlock and decides if the person can be trusted. If the request passes the authentication check, the lock unlocks. If the lock decides the person is not its recognized owner, it will refuse to unlock and force the user to disconnect. The WeLock uses a never-before-attempted application of the shape memory alloy nitinol to unlock itself. Nitinol is a special alloy that reversibly changes its crystalline structure when heated. When cooled, the material is easily deformed. However, once heated, the structure is not only far stronger, but has the remarkable property of contracting and returning to its original shape. The WeLock heats up Nitinol with electric current so it can be controlled by the microcontroller. When the unlock request is received and approved, the microcontroller sends a signal to the Nitinol and causes it to contract, pulling on the locking sear and unlocking. After a few seconds, the signal turns off and the Nitinol is allowed to cool down and return to its locked state.
The WeLock revolutionizes the way we think about personal security, integrating seamlessly with existing mobile devices. Access is just a button press away, yet more secure than ever.
WeLock. Let us do it for you.
Alright. Any questions?
Question. Okay. Yes.
So, since you're heating up the nitinol, is it eating through the plastic that it's wrapped around to pull the sear?
No, we use a little insulator tube
Yeah,
to wrap
you
around the
notice-
nitinol.
If you notice, there's that little bit of purple plastic tubing on it. That was because initially it was actually melting through the PLA that we were using, and so we had that there as a barrier for doing that.
What happens if you lost your phone?
If you lose your phone, you lose your life.
I was kind of curious how like authentication works. Like, how does it know like the correct phone from the wrong phone? And when you just buy a new one, is there a way to set it up with the correct phone? How does that kind of work?
So the way that we initially tried doing it was through Bluetooth addresses, because each device has its own Bluetooth address. And so when you first have the lock and you first power it on, the lock will be, the moment you connect to the lock, it will recognize your phone as the owner. And so it's kind of like a duckling, where the first thing it sees, it thinks it's its mom. It will imprint on your phone and remember your Bluetooth address. And then from that point on, any unfamiliar Bluetooth addresses are treated as foreign intruders and are rejected.